So I'm going to make these videos about Inspector Calls. This is the last of the GCSE literary text that I haven't done videos for. So in the first video, I'm going to do summary. Then I'm going to talk about the opening of the play, Burling before the inspector gets here, and then I'll go through each of the characters. So let's begin with a quick summary of the play. So it's a 3-act play. In Act 1, we're in April 1912 in the Midlands, and the Burling family are celebrating the marriage of Gerald Croft and Sheila Burling. So it's an engagement party. I'm just going to write one word to kind of help remind me what's happening. Burling, who's Sheila's father, is really pleased about the marriage because the Crofts, Gerald's parents, are his competitors. And it's a kind of union of these competitors. So it's kind of a strategic, it's very Indian, I find. Strategic marriage. I don't know if it's strategic as in arranged in that sense, but it has a kind of financial purpose for the father, as opposed to love. When the women leave, Burling lectures them, and he says it's all about yourself, being all about yourself, and he has a lot of ideas about, in particular, he talks about the Titanic and how the Titanic isn't going to sink, and he's just a ridiculous figure because he's just fully wrong about everything. So they're interrupted, and so we meet this inspector. His name is Ghoul, which is a pun for ghost, because he's kind of the moral of the play, a ghostly figure. He knows everything. And a woman's dead, and it's a woman we never meet. Her name's Ava Smith. She's known by other names. She's dead. She's committed suicide, and he has to investigate because for some reason the family's involved, and they really don't understand why. It begins with Mr. Burling. So Mr. Burling denies knowing her, but then finds out that he fired her over a strike at the factory, and he kind of initiates her being unemployed. Her next job, she worked in a shop, and it looks like Sheila got her fired because Sheila felt insecure about how she looked, and Ava looked really great in a dress, and she felt she was laughing at her. So fired from a shop with this dress. And the inspector says, okay, look, she changed her name to Daisy Renton at this point. And Sheila notices her fiancé, Gerald, acting weird. And Sheila's already noticed that the inspector has this connection with everybody. And she knows something's up. So I'm just going to write Daisy Renton. Act 2, this basically goes through each character getting interrogated. And it turns out that Eva Smith, as Daisy, has had an affair because she was unemployed and homeless. And Gerald saved her from someone kind of hitting on her, and he had an affair with her. He kept her. He was quite kind to her. Sheila gives the engagement ring back because she doesn't think she wants to get married. Next is Mrs. Burling, and she's quite harsh, Mrs. Burling. She says she knows this picture of this woman, but she presented herself as a Mrs. Burling, which she found really insulting. Mrs. Burling herself, who runs a charity. And it seemed that Ava Smith, Daisy Renton, Mrs. Burling, however you want to call her, was pregnant and absolutely destitute and came to the charity for some help. And Mrs. Burling's position is that the baby's father should be responsible. And here we start to see the dramatic irony that she hasn't figured out what the audience has in this very simple play. What everyone's figured out, particularly Sheila, don't you see it's going to be Eric? It's obviously Eric is the dad because we're all invested. Mrs. Burling finds this ridiculous. Here we enter Act 3. So Eric, who's been away for a walk because he was all squiffy and drunk, comes back and finds out that he's basically... I mean, Eric's the most interesting character because Priestley sympathizes with Eric, because Eric changes from this rich, drunk idiot to someone who could potentially be more responsible. But it's clear that he gets drunk and he rapes, or, I mean, rapes is absolutely the accurate word. Sexually assaults, whatever you want to say, but it's a rape. Daisy Renton, Eva Smith, and gets her pregnant. And they subsequently start to date or spend time together. Eric steals for her. And she breaks up with him. So it's kind of retrospective because it's because of this she is pregnant and needs to go to the charity. They're shocked that he stole money. They're shocked. They're mostly shocked because he stole money. Nothing really else. So the inspector says everyone is to blame. All to blame. And if you don't change your ways, the world is going to, people are going to rise up and there's going to be fire and blood and anguish. This really famous quotation. After he leaves, Gerald comes back and kind of says, this is a fake. This inspector doesn't exist. So they feel they've been scammed and they all kind of are fine. And there's this division between Mr. and Mrs. Burling who say, okay, it's all fine. Eric and Sheila who are disgusted that everyone's acting this way. And Gerald's kind of in between, but he's more towards the Burlings. So this division of reactions. And then, of course, the phone call at the end, which says there's an inspector coming in. So we get this complete repetition. So it's a pretty simple play. It basically marks through an interrogation of all the major characters and invites the viewer to think about our own responsibility in terms of the poor and the destitute and the marginalized in our society, and what we as a society or what our responsibility is to other people, which is essentially Priestley's main idea.